Well, it's the beginning of the end for the Third Doctor, as his final season began with The Time Warrior, which was very significant, once again, to point out why a certain episode is very notable for certain things that happen in it and set certain standards and whatnot. And this one, of course, introduces us to the Sontarans. It is a Sontaran who is the Time Warrior because they do have the ability to travel through time. And the backstory of the Sontarans was, of course, they're a clone species, but also they're constantly engaged in this ongoing interstellar war with the Routons. No, not the Croutons. Routons. And we'll meet one of them later in the Fourth Doctor's adventure, which would be an interesting thing to revisit. The whole Sontaran and Rutan war would be interesting to explore more. And I believe that the Sontarans didn't really participate much in the Time War. I'm not up on all the details of that. I don't have the Big Finish episodes detailing that. So I don't know, but I had heard that something along those lines that they decided to sit that one out, which I kind of wondered, would they even have a choice to sit it out? But anyway, but that was always an interesting thing, that this constant, is these two warring factions, and everybody is always caught in the middle with them. But primarily, all we ever see are the Sontarans, So the first one we meet here is called Lynx. And the plot is really quite simple, and that's very smart. This is a simplistic adventure story here. He's an alien, obviously, and he crash lands on Earth in the Middle Ages. This sort of medieval warlord, Irongron, who's trying to, seize other lords and whatnot and take property, and eventually, probably assuming he would name himself king and all that. So he sees this crash and believes it's a star, that a literal star fell down, and he wants to achieve its power. And he goes there, and suddenly there's Lynx coming out of his spaceship. It's damaged, and so Lynx says, hey, let's make a deal. I'll provide you with super weapons in exchange for your help in my, working on repairs for my ship and whatnot. And so he says, yeah, sure. And, of course, what Lynx does is he develops rifles for them, centuries before such a thing was developed. So, of course, this is damaging to Earth's timeline and mankind's development and whatnot. In the meantime, they're not going to be much help to him in repairing his ship. He needs people who are capable of understanding the technical necessities of doing so. So his ship can't travel in space, but it can travel still in time, or at least reach out through time. He can teleport people from the future to him, and that's what he starts doing. He starts teleporting scientists from the 20th century, which I can't remember if it actually mentioned, but that was as far as he could go or something like that. But anyway, that's what he does. Well, we're introduced to where the Doctor is at this point with UNIT trying to protect scientists and trying to figure out what's going on, why are they disappearing, who's kidnapping them or whatnot. And so they've got this complex there, and they've got a bunch of select scientists that they suspect could be targets for whoever this villain is. Another very, very important event happens for Doctor Who, in which we are introduced to Sarah Jane Smith. Now, Sarah Jane is probably, for the most part, I think it's overall consensus, is the most favored of companions, and probably the quintessential Doctor Who companion in a lot of ways. She kind of covered the bases in it. She could be a damsel in distress, but she could also be heroic in her own right, and a lot of things like that. And was a great match for the Doctor, especially when we see her with the Fourth Doctor. It's like almost the perfect team there. And it ends all too quickly, and it's like he never could quite get back to that. I suppose the closest would be in the past would be the significance of the Second Doctor and Jamie, as far as a good team it goes. Certainly with the Doctor and Sarah, you kind of got the hint there that she was really into the guy. And certainly they seem to insinuate that when she returns in the new Who, when Tennant's doctor, and she's like, I waited for you, and he's kind of embarrassed and like, oh boy, I'm sorry about that. It's like Peter Pan meeting Wendy when she's all grown up. But yeah, that's but Sarah Jane Smith, of course, is a very important companion through the Doctor Who series, and here we first meet her, and she's kind of doing a Lois Lane thing here, where she's a reporter, and she's making use of her aunt's name, I believe, who had to have been a scientist in some field, and she manages to get herself into this unit facility, or I guess it was just a dorm room or whatever, building or something where they're housing them. But she comes in there to get the story. She thinks there's got a great story. Little does she know, it's probably the most incredible story any of her colleagues could have ever covered, and her life would never be the same. So she meets the Doctor. She doesn't quite know what to make of him, and initially she thinks the Doctor's a villain, and so she follows him in his TARDIS as he begins to suspect that this is some sort of temporal anomaly going on, and he follows the trail in the TARDIS to the Middle Ages and discovers, yes, there's some sort of alien interference here, abducting scientists from the 20th century, and he quickly figures out what's going on here. Sarah stows away on the TARDIS, follows him, and at first doesn't quite understand what's happened here, and thinks she's at some sort of a recreation, a Renaissance fair or something. I don't know. And eventually it dawns on her, holy crap, this is the real thing. They're all very serious. They're going to chop this guy's head off and stuff like that. And so then the adventure is on. At first she finds allies there, and she suspects the Doctor is behind all of this, and she says she tells these people he's a wizard or what have you. But eventually she understands that no, it's not the Doctor, it's this potato head man looking creature, or toad face as the Iron Grun called him. And so there you go. And then they have to figure out how to deal with this. They have to at some point even engage in this war between the two castles. The Doctor comes up with non-lethal but very smelly weaponry against them, which seems to work, and so on and so forth. But eventually the Suntaran is getting bored with this. He liked watching the battle, but he's ready to take off. And of course, the interesting thing here is an argument between him and the Doctor happens, and the Doctor's explaining, you keep giving them these weapons and they'll have the atom bomb within 100 years, and of course Lynx, I don't care. This planet means nothing to me. But ultimately Lynx all along was going to launch his ship, and it would have destroyed the castle, and so there wouldn't have been any remnants left of what he had done. But then of course whoever, maybe some could have survived with these weapons intact, and there you go, you've disrupted the development of mankind. So, and that's how when it doesn't he doesn't get away, of course, and this is one of those things where they right off the bat they reveal the weakness of the Suntarans, and he says, it's not a weakness, I'm always going to make sure I have the enemy in front of me. But what if the enemy sneaks behind you, which is exactly what happens. So they got this little vent on the back of their suit there, and if you hit it, it really disables them, and if you throw like a knife into it, or an arrow in this case, it kills them. So boy, you need to put something over that. But they never think of it. So, that's, of course, right then and there, you say, okay, now we see how Link's going to bite it in the end. And he does, but then his ship overloads and explodes and destroys all evidence of what's happened within that castle. So time is protected. The Doctor and Sarah return, and now he has a new companion. And what a companion does he have. Now, for the John Pertwee Doctor, I think Joe Grant will always be his quintessential companion. But Sarah, of course, came into her own, and it became unforgettable, really, and was greatly missed when she finally leaves the show. So much so that, of course, they brought her back for her own series with K9 and all that, which was always kind of odd. I thought, the Doctor says, well, I'm not going to visit you, but hey, I'll send you this robot dog. I haven't watched any of, I think, no, that's not true. I did watch one. And this was the newer one that they did for her. It just wasn't for me, but I understand people really liked it and are fond of it and all that. And it's very much a child's show, I thought. So that's all well and good. But her Doctor Who adventures are really what are legendary within the legend of Doctor Who. And so this was even more so than just introducing a new alien villain for the Doctor to take on in the case of the Sontarans, who have the ability to time travel, so that's pretty significant for them. But more importantly is we get to meet Sarah Jane Smith here in the twilight of the Third Doctor. So there you go. Which, interestingly enough, what leads to his demise has already been set up in the previous season. So, yeah, I don't, because I mean, initially they were going to do some final battle between the Master and the Doctor as his final episode, and apparently the plot was supposed to reveal that they were actually brothers and all this sort of thing. And it didn't come to fruition because, sadly, Roger Delgado had died in a car accident. I believe he was filming in, where was it, Turkey, I believe, or something along those lines. And, yeah, died in a car accident. And so, largely believe one of the things that probably Pertwee said, yeah, okay, I've had enough of Doctor Who for now. And, because they were good friends, and then he's not going to be able to do the show with him anymore. So, after a while, and up to this point, he'd been the longest running Doctor. And he'd probably, time to move on to something else. And so this was going to be his last season, if you will. And it would have been very different had things been very different. But, of course, it didn't work out that way, unfortunately. So, but then again, I don't know if Delgado had lived, would this have been Pertwee's last season? I don't know. But we ended up getting a different episode, which ties in with that whole thing with Metabolus 3 and the crystal and all that sort of thing. So we'll come back to that because I only have a handful of episodes from this final season for Pertwee. But anyway, so, and the signs of something different is I thought this was something they just did for Doctor Who, was the opening sequences is different, is new. It's the Vortex from the Tom Baker era, but it began here with Pertwee. And actually, I kind of really like the way it starts out in the Pertwee version than I do for the Tom Baker version. But the thing about that was that eventually, when Baker's last season comes along, that's when it starts over with the new theme song and the outer space scenes and stuff. Leading into what would become the signature opening sequences for Peter Davison. And I thought, oh, that's just how they do that. And when they're getting ready for a new Doctor, they change it. No, I think that was just the circumstances. Because Colin Baker never really got his own. They kind of tweaked it a little, but it's basically still Peter Davison's opening sequence. And then they changed everything for Sylvester McCoy. Of course, they didn't change the sequence before Colin Baker left because, well, they didn't really know he was leaving. Boy, that's talk about a raw deal. But anyway, that's how that works. And, well, New Who is just, well, it's really its own thing. And, boy, it's not really Doctor Who at all anymore, is it? Jeez. But let's stick to the classic ones when I'm talking about them. So anyway, there you go, the Time Warrior. Thank you for watching and listening. Say, why not like and subscribe? And check out that link description below. That'll take you to my mini stores that have plenty of goodies for you. T-shirts, mugs, all that good stuff. And head over to Indie Planet where you can get your hands on my comic book. Yeah, the Night Night comic book. Yes, based on my audio plays of the same name, but now you can see him in action and in the brilliant color of the pages of his comic book. That's Night Night over at IndiePlanet.com. And, of course, you can watch my videos over at BitChute. That's the Mr. Nailsin channel at BitChute.com.